almost 10 years ago, is that we see a lot of overlap between the goals and the areas of involvement and interest. And I think this is integral and is the key characteristic of a green economy. You can't take anything one piece or one meal. Every part of the system is a holistic ecosystem. Every part has an involvement in the other. And therefore, any kind of involvement or any kind of change has to be one that's holistic and across the entire ecosystem. As a specific example, if we look at the fifth goal, which is rationalizing the use of water resources and natural resources, but then we also look at the fourth, which is climate change and promoting agriculture. The biggest driver of water use is agriculture. And so as we look at these goals, while they're overarching goals, the mechanisms of execution are actually overlapping. And that's very exciting because it means any one intervention has a multiplier effect. And the challenges that we face are significant. And they are significant today and will continue to grow more significant in the future. But I think if we look at it from a more optimistic perspective, the challenges we face also present massive opportunities, both in terms of job skills and job creation, the types of jobs that we're looking at, and the types of technologies that can be introduced and can be used. I'll talk a little bit later about what our team looks like and what we're looking for. But the job force and the task force of 10 years ago, that's not necessarily what it is today. And so along with these massive challenges come just a realm of wide and exciting opportunities. I think here in the UAE specifically, we're very blessed because while food security specifically has always been an issue and has been at the back of our minds, especially here in the region, there hasn't really been any action towards it until COVID. But in the UAE, we actually had a Ministry of Food Security be set up. We have a National Food Security Strategy. We have a specific AgTech fund set up. And the kind of involvement and focus across the public sector provides so much support for entrepreneurs, for younger people to get involved that we don't see in the rest of the world. We are a region both with the greatest problem statement, but also with the greatest opportunity. There's one thing I always say is there's no Google or Netflix of the space in agriculture, specifically in food security. So that provides a lot of opportunity for us to develop it. I think Madar Farms is an example. We'll hear from my colleague Nabil as well and how they're looking at food security and water security as well. But there's so many other examples here in the UAE, and there still isn't kind of that global pioneer. We have an opportunity to transition and become a center of excellence, not only for the region, but for the globe. And, not only has it been identified, but that support is available. We're very lucky to have been part of the initial $100 million investment from Abu Dhabi Investment Office, specifically with a focus on precision agriculture. And what precision agriculture is and what it provides is just one part of a broader ecosystem. Today, we live in the fourth agricultural revolution. Over the last 100 years, we focused in terms of food production on how to grow more, how to grow more with the space that we have, but we haven't put in the lens of sustainability. How can we do so in the long term? And how can we do so in a sustainable way? But that has been identified here, and we have an opportunity to leapfrog that globally. And so we think of green economies, as Masdar, a city that has its own closed economic system. We look at sustainability, a net zero energy system, a closed system. But greening the economy, the opportunities I said are across the board. What I'm specifically going to talk about is AgTech. Food production greater than more than 80% of water use in the region is agriculture or irrigation. The tie-in between water and food security, while has always been there, is only recently coming to focus. And at the same time, the intersection of technology and agriculture has also recently come into focus. The Internet of Things, data tracking, analysis, computer vision, and being able to bring those techs into growing. Now, growing traditionally has always been kind of your outdoor and land-based and sea-based farming methods. We've seen, over the last 30, 40 years, a transition towards greenhouses, allowing us to localize and grow more, allowing us to do a bit of basic climate control. But what we were seeing over the last 5 years is the introduction of fully indoor farms. These are farms that utilize fully controlled climate control systems, completely closed off from the external environment. They could be vertical farms in which you layer up farms like a building, layer up growing. We use hydroponic technology. We were growing water instead of soil by controlling the environment, by growing in water, by being able to optimize the environment. We're able to grow things we weren't able to before and places we weren't able to before in a way that's sustainable for the environment. It is a key solution to what we're facing here in the UAE. It's not a one-stop solution, and there's so many other things to do, but that's what we at Madar focus on. And our pillars are basically split up across three main areas. So our commercial growing, and we're very excited about what we're building out at Kizad, which is a free zone area between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. It'll be the world's first and obviously largest, because it's the first commercial scale indoor farm growing vine crops using LED lights. But all of that is supported by our R&D. Over the last 4.5 years, because this is such an early stage industry, we've had to do the R&D in-house, we've had to develop it, we've had to partner with universities and do that kind of trial and error. And this is a key message that I want to share. This is not something that we're taking off the shelf. This is not something where there is a global pioneer or leader that we're following or copying, but rather that what is happening in the UAE, what is happening in Abu Dhabi is being created by ourselves. Hopefully we can create world standards and become global exporters of knowledge in the field. And that's why our third pillar is perhaps our most important is education and community engagement. The biggest challenge we face is education and awareness. We're so thankful for opportunities like this, where we can talk to people 10, 20, 50, 1,000. But how do you start having that conversation with 1 million people, 10 million, 50 million, and so on? So what we actually did was we created our own educational curriculum. And we've got these small indoor farms that we launch within schools, where the program is integrated as part of their education curriculum, and students can actually grow and farm themselves. Now, this is key. The kind of intervention that we're looking at is very long-term. And the knowledge base and the talent base and awareness that we need is also long-term and a deep gap. And so in both we as a group here today, but we as Madar as well have to play a leading role in being able to provide that by localizing the content, by providing the examples, and by making sure that what we do is not only in terms of product development, but education and skill transfer. Now, AgTech today is going to be a leading driver in greening the economy in the UAE, but it's only one part of the entire holistic ecosystem. We're going to see another example of that today, but I think a key takeaway is that the food problem itself, we could look at blockchain tracing. We could look at food wastage. We could look at different inputs and consumables. The opportunities are endless. It's just that we as Madar have decided to focus on precision agriculture. We are in line with the National Food Security Strategy. It's part of the reason why we've received the backing from the Abu Dhabi Investment Office. But all of this is done in a way that is able to provide a support system for the local ecosystem that is able to do the skill transfer and make sure that we have the talent pool ready, not only for us, but for the wider industry. And so specifically in this group, you might be thinking what you can do. I think for me, the thing that keeps me up at night is how can we get this message to as many people as possible? Retaining talent, that has been our biggest challenge and our biggest advantage. Agriculture, it's not exciting. When I tell my family what I do, they still think that I'm out working in the farms, or if you speak Arabic, "Jinni fallah, قاعد أشتغل بالمزرعة." But that's not the case. We are looking at data sets. We are thinking about computer vision and automation and robotics in the future. Think beyond what your current jobs or educational skill sets might be doing. And I think most important is that a lot of the numbers that we look at specifically in this space are very large and are very scary. And even as Madar, we might still be a drop in the ocean, but it takes a concerted group effort in order to move the needle. And it's not, a wish have or a can have. This is definitely a must have. I've tried to keep the message as kind of concise as possible, focus on a high level message so that we have enough time for Q&A. But I'm happy to, have this guided however Sarah sees fit.
Yes, I think we have a few questions from our participants, Najoud specifically.
Yes. So thank you very much, Abdulaziz, for the presentation. It's really fascinating to hear about what Madar has achieved so far. And it's quite nice hearing that it's the first, your first, the project, the vertical farm is in KZAD, one of our asset companies in ADQ, because I work in ADQ, and we have a food and agri cluster. And food and agri is not my specialty, energy is, but it's very interesting to see the dimensions between food, water, and energy, collide together. So I guess in terms of my question is, if we take a step back, what do you think is the gap right now in the UAE market as a whole when it comes to resource allocation and how we use our data set to advise on what's the best supply for the demand that we have locally and to rely less on the food imports? Do you think we have a gap in that kind of role where there would be a decision maker with data modeling, facilities that would give guidance to the commercial businesses as yourself?
It's a great question, Najud. Thank you. And I think it's funny. It's appropriate that it's coming from ADQ. We do a lot of work with ADQ, with the team Faisal and everybody. And ADQ, actually, for those that are interested, recently published a thought paper on cultivating talent and cultivating data in the space. And the ecosystem of players in the UAE is a very small one today. The challenges that we face from a regulatory point of view are still meaningful enough that entrants are somewhat dissuaded. But I think seeing local examples develop, having involvement with GREs like ADQ or ADIO or the Ministry of Food Security are helping bringing it down. One of the key challenges that we face, Najud, that you brought up is data access. When people ask me, today you're an indoor farm, what does it look like in 20 years? I don't know what it looks like in 20 years. And the message I always give to the team is we have to position ourselves for success regardless, because indoor farming for us, we can grow a certain set of crops. And the way we've decided that is first and foremost based on national security, food security and food index. Secondly, in terms of what our technology is able to provide in terms of our edge. And third, to make sure that it's commercially viable such that we can provide that sustainability long-term. Because the technology is early stage, and while even in the longer term as we invest in R&D, there is a limitation to that. And we recognize that. And we recognize if we are to solve food security, it can't be this one intervention. It has to be indoor farming in a certain space. There is a space for outdoor agriculture. There's going to be a space for land-based sea farming. There's going to be a space for alternative animal feed. There's going to be a space for alternative proteins, and so on and so on. I think the biggest gap that we still see is there's so many initiatives from the public sector, so many initiatives from different stakeholders, but that kind of holistic involvement and intervention and kind of planning still hasn't happened. I think it's natural because we're still in a very early stage greenfield. There's still a lot for us to overcome. And so, even a little is having a great change. But if we're thinking about taking a step from a nascent industry to a growing one, that's the big step we have to take. and data access and being able to make the right decisions for the right companies and the right technologies, that's going to be a key enabler for us.
Okay.
Clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Najud.
I also have a question actually. Do you think that the financial burdens of going into these kind of projects could be one of the things that stop maybe startups or stop the government and the public sector to initiate more into these kind of projects?
Yes and no. So I think the public sector is one thing, and then I think people is another. I think the biggest challenge from a people perspective is you sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed about what it is that you're facing.
Yeah.
When we look at the number, I remember when I started 4.5, 5 years ago, it was literally me and one other person. We were in the desert and we were learning how to farm. You know, my background is banking and consulting. You know, I'm an eater, not a grower. And it was a huge learning curve to actually farm ourselves. And then it was a huge learning curve. The public sector is supportive, but how do you help? Because it's not been done before. And then it's a huge learning curve from a retailer point of view. What is it you're offering? There's a learning curve from a customer point of view in terms of helping them understand what's better and aligning with their changing behavior. I think for all of those things, the only thing you can do is actually execute. A lot of people get kind of petrified at the over planning stage. And I would love to sit here and tell you that 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I sat down and I had a fully developed strategy and it's worked out exactly like that. That's absolutely not the case. Pretty much everything we've planned for has, gone completely awry. It's more having a can-do attitude, because the problems that come up are, something you can plan for.
Yeah.
On the financial side, I think if you're guided by a vision that provides value for the community as a whole, and I'll give a specific example. We, from a produce point of view, we are not looking to displace local growers. So if there's somebody here in the UAE who has a local farm and they're growing and they can provide a product, that's not who we look at as quote unquote our competition. We look at imported foods from Holland, from Europe, the States, etc. Those are our competition because it's import substitution. When we look at it from that point of view, our financial dynamics change drastically. And on top of that, there's a clear, tangible community value add in addition to our water saving sustainability technologies. Bringing all of that together and solving problems for retailers, for customers, and for the public sector, those financial headwinds or challenges, you will find the right support, whether that is from the public sector, whether it's from private sector investors, it doesn't matter. But when you create a win-win-win situation, eventually you will find the right kind of support.
Yeah. All right. I think Faris also has a question. Faris, please go.
Yes. No. Thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.
One of the, I'm proud to see such capacity developed in the agriculture sector. Sorry, it's been a hectic day. سامحوني مش حتى I'm not wearing my letra. But just a quick note, 2 notes actually. One is it's very evident that technology is taking a big impact on agriculture sector specifically, especially for areas like the region here with the harsh temperatures. And so when you speak about technologies and being utilized in indoor farming, the point here is how can we incentivize investors or entrepreneurs to join this sector? What would make them join this sector? Obviously, there's concerns from the leadership about food security and water security, and So from that perspective as well, what support are you getting from the government to make that happen, to enable that, let's say, vision, to make it, to realize that vision, and what could be done more?
Absolutely. يعطيك العافية فارس. Honestly, if it wasn't for my colleague, I'd probably كون مفرقان as well, for no worries at all. So a few things that come to mind when you ask that question. Thank you for that. I think first and foremost, Lillah alhamd, we've been blessed specifically here in the UAE as we compare it to the rest of the region. As an example, I'm from Kuwait, I'm not from the UAE. But I've been here for the last 10 years. And one of the reasons I decided to start here was, even as early as I did, there was still an element of support that was there. I think when we look at 2021, where we are today, there are examples across the food tech ecosystem, and there is support and vehicles that we don't see in the rest of the region. I think that was one of the big key enablers. So as an example, we're building a first in a free zone, building a farm. You can imagine the regulatory hurdles that came with that. What kind of license should we have? How do you zone the building? Civil defense, we don't need fire sprinklers because 99% of it is plants. Really small logistical issues, but things that can be intimidating, I think, for an entrepreneur. So I think first having early examples, pushing through, and what we do when we work with the public sector is we create what we call a national playbook. All of the problems that we face, we share it with the respective authorities, and we do it in a way such that we can enable access for other people. I think that's a key ingredient. The second is, of course, let's call it the multiplier effect. We at Madar today, when we're building, we're also working with a construction company. And the construction company that's building a farm is not building a farm like it's built one before. Our farms are health and safety. We're HACCP certified, so hazard analysis and critical control points. It's like a hospital. COVID didn't affect us in our operations because the way we're designed like a hospital operating clean room. That kind of knowledge transfer happens to the constructor as well. It happens to the regulator in that area. It happens to the municipality. And I think that multiplier effect of knowledge will in and of itself start to create an industry because you need the supporting ecosystem around that. Finally, I think it's around skill availability. If I look at our team, our head of ops, his background is aerospace manufacturing. And our director of growth background was computational linguistics. We have various educational professional backgrounds. The key takeaway is that this is a new field, and approaching it with a new perspective is needed. There doesn't have to be that limit or that necessity for a certain skill set. And the problem is so big that you can draw on so many resources that there's no limit to it. But traditionally and culturally, when we look at agriculture, specifically in food, it's not one of those industries that your families or your communities get excited about. It's not one of those industries that's looked at like an engineer or a doctor. I tell my family I left banking or consulting, they still think I'm crazy because, they still think I need help finding a job. I keep getting calls saying, do you need help finding a job? Because they think that I'm somehow in trouble. We need to change this mentality. We need to help them understand that this is the future. Some of the research projects we were working on involve computer vision and robotics and automation to take a lot of the manual labor out. But finding the talent pool and relegating it to, or helping them understand it's relevant to agriculture has been a specific challenge for us. And I think in that sense, spreading the message and the public sector's focus on food security and the message has been incredibly important. The final point I'll put at is the financial resources aspect. I think with the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, they have a 1 billion dirham fund specifically for agricultural technology. To this day, they've deployed into only 4 companies, of which only one of them was a local company. While that is great, and it is great to attract a lot of broad talent and bring the best of the best, we should look at that and use it as an opportunity to say, hey, if Madar Farms can do it, and if this crazy guy can do it, then so can we, you know? And I think it's examples like that, inshallah, that will introduce. And, you know, one thing I just want to focus on, sometimes I get lost in it, is we're an indoor farming company today, but the food security problem is a very big one. Today we're growing leafy greens and vegetables, but that's not true food security. And so part of our food development program has to be tied to the food nutrition index. You still have a livestock problem, you still have a protein problem, you still have a fat problem. And so there's a multitude of areas in which to go at. You don't have to look at it as, oh, I have to solve food security. No, we have a big poultry industry, but where do they get their feed from? We have a big livestock and dairy industry, but all of that feed is 100% imported. There are so many singular problems that can be tackled with a lot more concentrated energy. And so although the broader support, like I said, is there, I think not looking at it as food security and breaking it down into silos becomes a lot more accessible for people. I know that was a long-winded answer, but inshallah جاوبت على سؤالك.
مشكور يعطيكم العافية.
الله يعافيك.
Okay. I just have one last question, and then we can maybe. So you mentioned that you also work with, you have your own research department. So you do have, like, for some of our participants who are also interested in research and within green economy, is there a way for them to access this kind of data that you have, or have any access to support in the research that they are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big things to point out specifically for agriculture in this region, it is a massive problem. We're a very collaborative industry, specifically here. And one of the reasons that's different from, let's say, other economies is because it is the biggest problem. And we're not fighting over a small piece of the pie because the pie is so big. And so you see a lot more collaboration in our industry than you might see otherwise. For us, as we look at research, there we have in-house research that we do at Madar. We have research where we partner with universities, and we have research where we partner with other companies. Because we're guided by a vision of what gets us to the end the most efficient way, we are very much tech agnostic and research agnostic. And so we're very open in terms of sharing data, but at the same time, there has to be some sort of action with that data.
Yeah.
I think we have so many on-the-ground resources. There's so much access to do something. We are arms wide open if somebody wants to come to us with a solution, with a testing ground. Sa'al baraka.
Perfect. All right. Are there any other questions to Mr. AlMulla? All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the opportunity, everybody.